The winds of Helios 6 howled across the frozen plains like vengeful spirits, carrying crystals of ice sharp enough to slice through standard-issue environmental suits. Dr. Raven Winters watched the temperature readout on her wrist display drop another 2 degrees, already well below what most species considered survivable. Not that anyone else would be foolish enough to be out here in the first place. The research station's proximity alerts had detected an anomalous energy signature 3 kilometers out, strong enough to pierce through the perpetual storm that blanketed the planet's surface. Any other day, Raven might have logged it and waited for better conditions. But something about the pattern had caught her attention. It wasn't the usual electromagnetic disturbance from the planet's unstable core, but rather a deliberate, almost rhythmic pulse. "Station, this is Winters," she called into her calm, voice barely audible over the howling wind. "Maintaining heading 035. Signals getting stronger." Static crackled back at her. The storm was probably interfering with communications again. She'd have to rely on the locator beacon to guide her back. Raven adjusted the power flow to her suit's heating system, knowing she was burning through energy faster than recommended. The alternative was freezing to death before she could satisfy her curiosity. The signal led her to the edge of a vast crevasse, its depths lost in swirling snow and darkness. Her suit's enhanced vision picked up something reflecting the planet's dim sunlight, something that didn't belong in this wasteland of ice and rock. Raven carefully approached the edge, anchoring herself with pitons designed to hold in the densest ice. What she saw made her breath catch in her throat. Half buried in the snow was a figure unlike anything in the xenobiological database. Its form was vaguely humanoid, but its skin appeared to be composed of living crystal, refracting light in impossible patterns. Delicate spires of what looked like diamond or quartz extended from its joints, and what might have been hair flowed like liquid silver. The being's chest rose and fell in shallow movements. Still alive, but barely. "Oh hell," Raven muttered. The smart thing would be to call it in, wait for a proper extraction team. But in these conditions, that would take hours they didn't have. She could already see the crystal-like patterns on the alien's skin growing darker, failing. Raven began setting up her emergency shelter, hands moving with practiced efficiency despite the numbing cold. The portable haven would only hold for about an hour in these conditions, but it might be enough. As she worked, she kept glancing at the alien's face. There was something haunting about its features, beautiful, but in a way that made her chest ache with its otherworldliness. With the shelter secured, she carefully approached the unconscious figure. "I really hope you're not temperature sensitive in the wrong direction," she muttered, activating her suit's medical scanner. The readings were chaos, the device clearly unable to make sense of the alien biology. But one thing was clear, its core temperature was dropping rapidly. Getting the alien into the shelter was a challenge. Despite its crystalline appearance, its body was surprisingly light, almost hollow-boned like a bird's. But its long limbs and sharp protrusions made maneuvering difficult. By the time Raven had it positioned on the shelter's emergency cot, her suit was reporting dangerous power levels. "Come on," she whispered, activating the shelter's heating system and wrapping the alien in thermal blankets. "Don't die on me after all this trouble." As if in response, the being's eyes fluttered open. Raven gasped. They were like contained supernovas, swirling with colors she had no names for. The alien's gaze fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin prickle even through the suit. Its mouth moved, forming words in a language that seemed to consist entirely of musical tones. "Easy," Raven said, holding up her hands. "I'm trying to help. You were freezing to death." The alien's expression shifted, those incredible eyes widening slightly. It spoke again, this time in halting standard English. "You, risk yourself." "Why?" "Because you needed help," Raven replied simply. "And I'm not in the habit of leaving anyone to die, no matter what species they are." A sound like crystal wind chimes filled the shelter. It took Raven a moment to realize the alien was laughing, though the sound held more wonder than humor. Humans, it said, the word carrying a weight of meaning she couldn't quite grasp. Always surprising. Before Raven could respond, her suit's alerts began blaring. The storm was intensifying, and the shelter's integrity wouldn't hold much longer. She quickly began packing up the essential equipment. We need to move. My research station is about 3 kilometers from here. Can you walk? The alien attempted to rise, its movements graceful despite its obvious weakness. With assistance, perhaps. I am Zarental, and I owe you a life debt. Raven Winters, she replied, supporting Zarental's weight as they prepared to face the storm. And let's focus on surviving the next hour before we worry about debts. The journey back to the station was a blur of wind and ice and determination. Raven's suit power dropped to critical levels, her muscles screamed in protest, and several times she nearly lost her footing on the treacherous ground. But Zarental's presence beside her was like a beacon, the alien's crystalline form occasionally pulsing with weak but beautiful light patterns that seemed to guide their way. When they finally reached the station's airlock, Raven was shaking with exhaustion. As the inner door cycled open, revealing the blessed warmth of her home for the past 2 years, she turned to check on her companion. Zarental's eyes met hers, and something passed between them, an understanding that transcended their biological differences. Your touch, Zarental said softly, those stellar eyes seeming to see straight through to her soul, it brings warmth even through your protective barriers. How remarkable. Raven helped the alien to the station's medical bay, her mind racing with questions about what she'd discovered and what it might mean. One thing was certain, her life on this frozen world had just become far more interesting. The research station's med bay hummed with the soft sound of diagnostic equipment as Raven studied the readings on her holographic display. After 3 days, she was no closer to understanding Zarental's unique biology. The crystalline being sat perfectly still on the examination table, patient as ever, while patterns of light rippled beneath their translucent skin. Your instruments seem troubled by my presence, Zarental observed, their melodic voice carrying a hint of amusement. Perhaps they share your curiosity. Raven smiled, pushing back a strand of dark hair that had escaped her messy bun. Can you blame them? Your cellular structure, if I can even call it that, defies everything we know about organic life. Those energy patterns you generate, the way your crystalline matrix responds to temperature changes, it's fascinating. Just as I find your form equally intriguing, Zarental replied, reaching out with one delicate crystalline hand. So much water, such inefficient heat regulation, yet you survive in environments that would shatter my people. And your emotions, they radiate from you like solar flares. Raven felt her cheeks warm at the observation. Over the past few days, she'd discovered that Zarental's people, the Lasari, perceived the world in ways humans could barely comprehend. They could sense electromagnetic fields, thermal variations, and even the subtle energy signatures of emotional states. Speaking of emotions, Raven said, trying to steer the conversation toward the questions that had been nagging at her, are you ready to tell me what brought you to Helios 6? This isn't exactly a popular tourist destination. Zarental's luminescent eyes dimmed slightly, their crystal spires chiming softly with what Raven had learned to recognize as distress. I was fleeing. My research, my discoveries, they threatened certain powerful interests among my people. What kind of research? I study the resonance between different forms of consciousness, Zarental explained, their inner light pulsing with passionate colors. My work suggested that despite our physical differences, species like yours and mine share fundamental patterns of awareness. Some among the Lasari consider such ideas dangerous. They believe our crystalline nature makes us superior, separate from organic life forms. Raven frowned, moving closer to her unusual patient. They tried to suppress your research. They tried to suppress me, Zarental corrected, a cascade of dark blue rippling through their form. I barely escaped with my core intact. But my ship was damaged in the pursuit, and I crashed here. I expected to fade into darkness, until... Until a curious human dragged you in from the cold, Raven finished, trying to lighten the mood. Her hand moved unconsciously toward Zarental's, stopping just short of contact. The crystalline being completed the gesture, their fingers intertwining with hers. The touch sent a tingling sensation up Raven's arm, like static electricity but somehow pleasant. Your people have a saying about curiosity and felines, I believe. Yet here you are, defying death to satisfy your questions. Here we both are, Raven agreed softly. She found herself mesmerized by the way light played through Zarental's form, creating rainbow patterns on the med bay's sterile surfaces. So, tell me more about these consciousness patterns you've discovered. Hours passed as they shared knowledge and stories. Raven learned that the Lasari experienced time differently than humans, their crystalline forms allowing them to enter states of suspended animation that could last centuries. They drew energy directly from stellar radiation, and their society was built around massive crystal arrays that served as both habitation and communication networks. In turn, she told Zarental about Earth's diverse biosphere, the way human culture had been shaped by our need to adapt and innovate, and the drive that had pushed them to the stars. The crystalline being was particularly fascinated by human art and music, their form resonating in harmony when Raven played recordings of classical compositions. Your species creates beauty from chaos, Zarental observed as a piano concerto filled the med bay. You embrace disorder and transmute it into something magnificent. My people seek perfect symmetry, eternal patterns, but perhaps we lose something in that pursuit. Maybe that's what your research is really about, Raven suggested. Finding the beauty in different ways of being, instead of trying to force everything into the same pattern. Zarental's eyes brightened. Yes. Exactly. The universe itself is a symphony of diverse frequencies, each consciousness adding its own unique note to the greater harmony. To deny that diversity is to diminish the whole. The passion in their voice made Raven's heart race. She'd never met anyone who shared her perspective on the interconnectedness of life quite like this. You know, she said, my research here on Helios 6 is about adaptation, how life might evolve to survive in extreme conditions. Your people's biology could revolutionize our understanding of what's possible. And your insights into organic adaptation could help my people move beyond their rigid thinking, Zarental replied. Their joined hands pulsed with shared excitement at the possibilities. The moment was interrupted by a sudden alert from the station's security system. Raven reluctantly pulled away from Zarental to check the readings. Her blood ran cold as she processed what she was seeing. What is it? Zarental asked, sensing her distress. Something just entered orbit, Raven said grimly. And it's not answering any of the standard identification protocols. Zarental's form darkened. They found me. Raven, I cannot let them hurt you for sheltering me. Let me worry about that, Raven replied, her jaw set with determination. You're not alone anymore. The orbital scanner's warning klaxon echoed through the research station's corridors as Raven rushed to secure vital equipment. Outside, Helios 6's eternal storm was intensifying to unprecedented levels, as if the planet itself sensed the approaching threat. The unidentified ship had taken up a holding pattern in high orbit, its energy signature matching the crystalline technology of Zarental's people. They're called the Symmetry Guard, Zarental explained, their crystalline form pulsing with anxious patterns as they helped Raven prepare the station's defenses. Elite enforcers who maintain what they call purity of form among the Lasari. They'll want to make an example of me, and anyone who aids me. Raven paused in her work, meeting those luminescent eyes. I'm not letting them take you. This station has some surprises built in, perks of being funded by people who like their research to stay private. The security console chimed again. 3 smaller vessels had detached from the main ship, their trajectory suggesting they planned to land near the station. At the same time, the environmental sensors were reporting dangerous fluctuations in the planet's magnetic field. The storm is feeding off their ship's energy signatures, Raven realized, studying the data streams. They're making it worse without even knowing it. If they're not careful, they'll trigger a cascade reaction in the atmosphere. Zerental moved closer, their crystalline fingers dancing over the holographic displays. Their arrogance blinds them to the delicate balance of this world. Just as they refuse to see the beauty in diversity, they ignore the complexity of natural systems. A massive thunderclap shook the station's foundations. The external cameras showed lightning strikes of impossible size, their colors distorted by interaction with the Lasari ship's energy fields. The temperature outside was dropping rapidly as the storm drew heat from the environment. "We need to warn them," Raven said, already reaching for the communications array. "Whatever our differences, I won't let them destroy themselves out of ignorance." But before she could broadcast a message, the station's proximity alerts screamed to life. One of the Lasari vessels had landed less than a kilometer away, its crystalline structure already beginning to fracture under the intense cold and electromagnetic stress. "Raven," Zerental's voice was urgent, their form brightening with determination. "I can help them. My research, it wasn't just about consciousness. I discovered ways to harmonize our crystalline technology with organic and environmental patterns. I can prevent the cascade reaction, but you'd have to reveal yourself," Raven finished, understanding dawning. "And they might shoot first, ask questions later." The crystalline being's light rippled with what might have been a sad smile. "The irony is that this situation proves my theories. Their rigid adherence to symmetry and purity has made their technology vulnerable to chaos. Only by embracing adaptation, as your species does so naturally, can we survive." Another lightning strike rocked the station. On the monitors, the landed Lasari ship's crystal structure was showing critical stress patterns. Soon it would shatter, releasing energies that would only feed the growing storm. Raven made a decision. "We do this together. I'll broadcast on all frequencies, they'll have to listen or die. You focus on the harmonics. Show them what their precious purity has cost them." Working in swift synchronization, they put their plan into action. Raven's fingers flew over the communication controls while Zerental extended their consciousness into the station's systems. Their crystalline form began to resonate at frequencies that made the air itself vibrate with strange harmonies. "Lasari vessels," Raven broadcast, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Your ships are causing a fatal resonance in our atmosphere. The storm will destroy you unless you accept our help. We have one of your own here, a scientist who can save you, if you'll listen." For a terrible moment, there was no response. Then the main view screen lit up with the image of a Lasari commander, their crystalline form rigid with perfect geometric patterns that seemed almost brittle compared to Zerental's fluid grace. "The traitor," the commander's voice rang with harmonic overtones of disgust. "You dare offer help? Your corrupted form is an affront to all we hold sacred." "Look at your ship's readings," Zerental replied calmly, their resonance growing stronger. "Feel the disharmony you've created. The storm feeds on your resistance to change, just as our society crumbles under the weight of its own inflexibility." The station's sensors showed the storm reaching critical levels. The landed Lasari ship's crystal structure was beginning to sing with a frequency that made Raven's teeth ache. They were running out of time. "Commander," Raven interjected, "your people's lives are worth more than your pride. Let us help. Let us prove that different forms of life can work together, can make each other stronger." Lightning struck again, and this time the landed ship's outer layer began to crack. The screams of its crew, transmitted through crystalline harmonics, filled the command center with a sound like shattering glass. The commander's perfect features showed the first signs of fear. Sometimes, Raven thought, it took staring into the abyss to recognize the value of change. Now they would see if pride or survival proved the stronger force. Time seemed to crystallize as Raven watched the Lasari commander's face on the viewscreen, pride warring with survival instinct. Another violent tremor shook the station as the storm's intensity grew exponentially. The readings from the landed ship showed catastrophic structural failures beginning to cascade through its crystalline framework. Your ship's crew has less than 3 minutes before total crystal collapse, Zarental said, their voice carrying harmonics of urgency and compassion. Let me show you another way, Commander Threshold. Let me prove that adaptation is not weakness. The commander's perfect geometric patterns flickered with internal conflict. And if this is a deception? If you seek to corrupt more of our people with your chaotic theories? Then you'll still die with your precious purity intact, Raven snapped, her patience breaking. But you'll have murdered your own people for nothing more than pride. A particularly massive lightning bolt struck near the failing ship, its energy signature distorted by interaction with Lasari technology. The commander's image wavered as interference rippled through their communications. Do it, they finally ordered, their harmonic voice tight with suppressed emotion. Save them if you can, traitor. Zarental didn't waste time responding. Their crystalline form began to pulse with complex patterns of light and energy, resonating at frequencies that made Raven's instruments go haywire. She watched in fascination as waves of harmonic energy rippled out from the station, visible even through the raging storm as they intersected with the damaged ship's crystal matrix. Their structural integrity is stabilizing, Raven reported, monitoring the readings. But the storm's still building. We need to get their crew out of there before. The station's proximity alarm screamed again. The other 2 Lasari vessels were descending, their own crystal structures showing signs of stress from the atmospheric conditions. No. Zarental's voice rang with dismay. They'll overwhelm the harmonic field. I can't maintain stability for all 3 ships at once. Raven's mind raced. The station's shield generators, could we modify them to amplify your resonance patterns? Yes, but it would require redirecting power from life support and environmental controls. The cold would reach us within minutes. Their eyes met across the command center, understanding passing between them. How long would we have? Raven asked. Perhaps 15 minutes before hypothermia sets in. But Raven, your biology is more adaptable than you think, she finished with a grim smile. Start the modifications. I'll warn the ships and prep the emergency protocols. The next few minutes passed in a blur of desperate activity. Raven's fingers flew over the controls, redirecting power systems while broadcasting instructions to the Lasari vessels. Zarental's crystalline form began to integrate with the station's shield generators, their usually graceful movements becoming strained as they channeled more and more energy. The temperature in the station plummeted as life support power was diverted. Raven's breath began to fog in the air as she worked, her movements becoming slower as the cold seeped into her muscles. But she couldn't stop, not with dozens of lives hanging in the balance. The harmonic field is holding, Zarental reported, their voice tight with effort. The ship's crystal matrices are beginning to adapt to the storm's resonance patterns. But Raven, your core temperature is dropping too quickly. Just a few more minutes, she managed through chattering teeth. They're almost stabilized. The storm raged outside, but the Lasari ships were now glowing with a new frequency, their crystalline structures flowing and shifting in ways that seemed to deflect rather than resist the atmospheric energy. It was beautiful, Raven thought distantly, like watching evolution happen in real time. Commander, Zarental addressed the view screen, their own light flickering with fatigue. Your ships are safe now. The new harmonic patterns will hold, but you must leave this atmosphere quickly. The storm. The human, the commander interrupted, their perfect features showing an emotion Raven had never expected to see, concern. Her life signs are failing. Raven barely registered the words. The cold had become a physical presence, crushing her chest and turning her thoughts to ice. She tried to take a step and stumbled, her legs refusing to respond properly. Zarental caught her before she could fall, their crystalline arms wrapping around her with surprising gentleness. Where their forms touched, Raven felt a strange warmth beginning to spread, not physical heat, but something deeper, as if their energies were resonating together. "Hold on," Zerental whispered, their harmonic voice carrying emotions that transcended normal speech. "I think I understand now. What my research was really showing me. Consciousness isn't just patterns, it's connection. Adaptation isn't just survival, it's growth through union with the different, the unexpected." Their crystalline form began to pulse with new frequencies, the light patterns shifting in ways that seemed to defy their usual structure. Raven felt the warmth growing stronger, spreading through her frozen limbs as their energies synchronized in ways that should have been impossible. "What you're doing," the commander's voice held a mix of horror and fascination, "it goes against every law of our people." "No," Zerental replied, holding Raven closer as their combined energy signature stabilized. "It fulfills the highest law, the preservation of life and the evolution of consciousness. Watch, and understand what true harmony means." Through her fading awareness, Raven sensed something extraordinary happening. The boundary between her organic form and Zerental's crystalline structure was becoming less distinct, creating patterns of energy that neither of them could have generated alone. It wasn't just survival anymore, it was transformation. The research station's command center had become a nexus of impossible energies. Where Raven and Zerental's forms merged, reality itself seemed to blur, creating patterns of light and life that defied both physics and philosophy. The Lasari commander and their crew watched in stunned silence as organic and crystalline structures found a harmony that their rigid society had deemed impossible. Their energy signatures, one of the Lasari scientists reported, their crystalline form trembling with excitement, they're perfectly synchronized. The human's cellular structure is adapting to crystalline resonance patterns, while the trader's, Zerental's, matrix has developed organic characteristics. The commander's perfect geometric features showed cracks in their usual stoic expression. "Can you confirm these readings? This could change everything we thought we knew about our species." As the transformation stabilized, Raven felt strength returning to her formerly frozen limbs. Her consciousness expanded in ways she'd never imagined possible, experiencing reality through both organic senses and crystalline harmonics. Beside her, or perhaps within her, the distinction had become meaningless, Zerental's presence radiated joy and wonder. "This is what I was trying to prove," Zerental's voice rang with triumphant harmonics. "Life finds ways to transcend its limitations through connection, through the embrace of difference. We are stronger together than we could ever be in isolation." The storm outside the station had begun to calm, as if nature itself was responding to the new harmony they'd created. The Lasari ships, their crystal matrices now adapted to Helios SXS atmospheric patterns, glowed with stable energy signatures that complemented rather than fought the planet's natural forces. "Commander," Raven addressed the viewscreen, her voice carrying newfound resonance, "your people don't have to choose between purity and progress. Look at what we've achieved here. Different forms of life working in harmony, becoming something greater without losing what makes each unique." The commander was silent for a long moment, their crystalline structure shifting with internal conflict. Finally, they spoke with a humility that would have been unthinkable hours before. Perhaps our dedication to unchanging perfection has become its own form of entropy. Zerental, your research, we should have listened sooner." "It's not too late," Zerental replied gently. "Look at your ships, how they've adapted to this world's chaos. They're stronger now, more resilient. Just as the Lasari could be, if we open ourselves to new possibilities." As if to emphasize their words, the strange merger of human and crystalline energy created a display of light that filled the station with rainbow refractions. Raven could feel their combined consciousness touching the edges of understanding far beyond what either species had achieved alone. "I am instructing my crew to stand down," the commander announced. "And I will personally recommend to the Council that we re-evaluate our position on interspecies harmony. Your demonstration here cannot be ignored." Relief flooded through both Raven and Zerental's shared awareness. But there was something else too, a growing realization that their transformation wasn't temporary. They had created something entirely new, a bridge between two forms of life that had seemed incompatible. What happens now? Raven wondered aloud, both thrilled and uncertain about their future. Zarental's response carried warmth that had nothing to do with energy signatures. Now, my dear scientist, we explore. There are countless worlds between your realm and mine, countless possibilities we've only begun to understand. If you're willing. Try and stop me, Raven replied with a smile that resonated through both their forms. Though we might want to establish some research protocols first. The scientific community is going to have a field day with this. The commander cleared their throat with a harmonic rumble. The council will want to study this development as well. Perhaps we could establish a joint research initiative? Under proper supervision, of course. Under our supervision, Zarental corrected firmly. After all, we are the foremost experts in human Lasari integration. As arrangements were made for the Lasari ship's departure and future collaboration, Raven and Zarental stood together at the station's observation window. Outside, Helios 6's eternal storm had settled into a new pattern, its energies dancing in harmony with the lingering crystalline resonance from their transformation. You know, Raven mused, watching the play of light through their combined form, when I took this posting, I thought I was choosing isolation for the sake of science. I never imagined that you would find connection in the coldest place in the galaxy. Zarental finished, their shared consciousness humming with affection. Perhaps that's the greatest lesson here. Life doesn't just survive, it reaches across the void, finds new ways to grow, to love. Even if those ways break all the rules. Especially then. Their combined energy signature pulsed with joy. After all, what is love if not the ultimate adaptation? Above them, the aurora of Helios 6 painted the sky in colors that belonged to neither Earth nor the Lasari homeworld, but something gorgeously, perfectly new. Just like them, not human, not crystalline, but a promise of what life could become when it dared to reach across the stars and find its other half.